Captain Benjamin Sisko had returned from the Defiant's latest patrol to find that Starfleet had unexpectedly assigned him a new second-in-command to coordinate with Major Kira. Kira's reaction had been explosive. She believed Starfleet was passing judgment on her performance, or the perceived lack of it. Fortunately, Sisko had been able to quickly confirm that Commander Arlo was here only on temporary assignment. At the moment, Sisko was forcing himself to listen to every word Arlo Reese had to say about the time and motion modification studies that had arisen from observations of Bajoran and Starfleet personnel working together. When she had finished, Sisko nodded. "Commander, those are very insightful observations about working conditions on DS9, but they won't work." The dismayed young commander shook her head. "Sir, but how can you know without trying?" Sisko settled back in his chair with a patient smile. "I have tried them, Commander. I have no doubt they are true for humans and Bajorans. But look out there. What about Commander Worf? Commander Dax? Should we force Martians to celebrate the Bajoran Days of Atonement instead of Colonial Independence Day?" Arla's almond-brown eyes met his. "Well, actually, sir, one of my suggestions is that all group religious celebrations be banned from the station. Religious events really have no place in what is, at least for now, primarily a military environment, which is what DS9 will be for the duration of the Dominion War." Sisko concentrated on keeping his voice calm. "What surprises me, frankly, is that you, a Bajoran, are making this suggestion. We're not all religious fanatics. I mean, we're not all religious to the same degree, sir. With all due respect, I'd be much more inclined to believe that the Bajoran wormhole was a celestial temple if it didn't form with Verteron nodes. If it's truly a home for gods, shouldn't it operate outside the normal laws of physics? Sir, do you believe the wormhole aliens are the prophets?" Sisko placed his hands together. "I am sure that there are entities who live in the wormhole. I have no doubt that these entities are indeed what the Bajoran call their prophets." Arla spoke in earnest. "And are they gods? In all honesty, Commander, I don't know." "Bashir to Sisko. I've completed my preliminary scan of the two bodies Chief O'Brien found, and I'd say we're looking at two more murders. Both were killed by the same type of weapon that killed the Andorian." Sisko's jaw tightened. "I see. Does Quark have a connection to the Cardassians?" "I've asked Odo to bring him over to the infirmary. I think you should be here." "On my way, Doctor." Quark glanced furtively around the infirmary to avoid Captain Sisko's gaze, but everyone else was looking at him too. Everyone except the two very dead Cardassians on the examination table. What was left of them. Quark turned away. "Can't you cover them up or something? It's disgusting." Dr. Julian Bashir looked up from his continuing inspection of the corpses. After being blasted with microwaves, transporter fused to hull metal, and exposed to vacuum for a few years, these two are so mummified that one of them could be Garrick and you wouldn't be able to recognize him. Garrick, the Cardassian tailor, gave a polite cough from his position overlooking Bashir's shoulder. "One hastens to add, Doctor, that a simple process of elimination should serve to confirm that I am not one of the dear departed." Quark interrupted. "Excuse me, but can we get back to me for a minute?" Odo replied gruffly. "That depends. Are you ready to make a confession?" Quark bared his artfully stained fangs. "You people, you take the spore pie, all of you. 2 nights ago, an unexplained death. And what do? You play Let's Blame the Ferengi. And now, 2 more unexplained deaths from 10 years ago. And what do? I'm sick of being your one-size-fits-all answer to crime on DS9. There was only silence in the infirmary. Quark straightened his jacket, wondering if it just might be possible that he had finally managed to get through to these small-lobed aliens. Then Sisko ruined it all. "Quark, Why 10 years? How do you know when these two Cardassians were killed? Quark's ridged brow crinkled in puzzlement.
Isn't that what Dr. Bashir said? That they were killed during the occupation? That was 10 years ago.
Kira spoke up. Technically, the occupation spans anywhere from 6 to 66 years ago. Quark sputtered.
All right, I confess, I took a number out of thin air.
Bashir then spoke. Calm down, Quark. The only reason I've called everyone in here is to see if we can't get some answers. He turned to Garak, who was still hovering behind the examination table. May I call upon your expertise? Garak regarded the doctor warily. Oh, Doctor, I'm afraid that in matters of mysterious deaths I am entirely bereft of experience. Bashir clarified. I was speaking of your expertise as a tailor. Garak nodded graciously. But of course, you'd like me to examine the clothes these two are wearing. Without further hesitation, Garak bent over the table. Ah, Doctor, here's your first clue, and one doesn't have to be a tailor to see it. This one's hair, very characteristic. This man was a soldier in the Invidian battalion. They managed the southern provinces. Kira bristled. They were a death squad. Sisko put a hand on Kira's shoulder. Then, Garak, why is he in civilian clothes? Quark shook his head.
Humans, always changing the subject.
Garak lightly directed his answer to Kira. Perhaps he died on his day off. I'm sure his DNA profile will be on file at Central Records. Bashir asked the Cardassian.
Can you at least make a guess as to where the clothes were made?
Garak manipulated a pair of medical tongs to open up the tunic. He froze.
The lining... I often used this fabric myself. Look at the exquisite workmanship of that cross-stitching.
Oh my. This is one of mine. Unfortunately, though, it appears I have forgotten the customer. In fact, I have no recollection of even making this tunic. Odo looked thoughtfully at Garak.
Is it possible that you made or sold this tunic about the time of the withdrawal?
It's possible.
Quark had no intention of standing idly by while Odo proceeded with his typically time-consuming investigation. It was as if the changeling had never heard of the 9th rule and the value of acting on raw instinct.
Garak, tell me, can you remember anything that happened on the day of withdrawal?
Of course. Every detail. Quark shot a sideways glance at Odo. The changeling was frowning, but Quark knew it was for the same reason that he himself smiled. Garak was lying, and Quark and Odo knew it. Then Garak turned and left the infirmary without another word. Quark grinned at Odo.
See? The same thing happened to him.
Sisko shook his head. Am I the only one who's missing the point of this conversation? Quark explained.
Captain, neither Odo nor I can recall anything about what happened to us on the day of withdrawal. And I think it's obvious that Garak doesn't remember anything either.
Sisko rubbed at his goatee. Quark, why am I feeling that you're changing the subject now?
It's the same subject, Captain. 2 Cardassians dead from 6 years ago. An Ondorian dead today. Dr. Bashir says everyone was killed by the same type of microwave energy discharge. Now what you have to do is find someone with a link to all 3 victims. Does anyone else find it suspicious that Odo was going out of his way to blame these murders on me?
Odo shook with anger.
Quark, I'm warning you.
To Quark's relief, Sisko intervened. That's enough, Constable. This is an open investigation. Sisko looked at the doctor. I want you to prepare complete DNA profiles for these 2 bodies so we can identify them through Cardassian Central Records. Bashir nodded. I'll prepare the records, but aren't we at war with the Cardassians? For humanitarian purposes, Doctor, Starfleet and the Cardassian Union have established unofficial lines of communication to facilitate the identification of war dead and the repatriation of remains. You give me the profiles, I'll handle the rest." Then Sisko faced Odo. "As for you, Constable, I want a complete report on Dal Notran's death on my desk within the hour. And Quark, here's my offer to you. Cooperate with Odo in the investigation of Dal Notran's death. Answer all the questions he asks, and instead of being confined to your cell, you'll be under station arrest with a bodyguard." Then Sisko and Major Kira left the infirmary. Odo gestured sarcastically toward the door.
"Come along, Quark. You're with me."
But it appeared Dr. Bashir wasn't quite finished with either of them. Just a minute, you two. Is it true what you both said about not being able to remember what happened on the day of withdrawal?" Quark nodded emphatically.
"A complete blank. I remember starting to pack up the breakables in the bar when the first reports of the troop transport launches started coming through. And then, next thing I knew, Rom and Nog found me asleep in the storage room, and it was the next day."
Bashir looked at Odo. "How about you, Constable?"
"Nothing so mysterious. I've been thinking more about it, and I do remember breaking up a fight outside the chemist's shop. I was obviously hit by phaser fire and woke up a day later when the Bajoran provisionals arrived."
"You're sure that's what happened? I mean, someone saw you get shot, or you confirm there was a fight at the chemist's?"
Odo nodded.
"Now that you mention it, yes, I do recall looking into it over the next few days. When the fighting broke out, I went to the promenade. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up and the whole thing was over. The withdrawal, Gul Dukat's departure, I missed it all."
With that, Odo escorted Quark from the infirmary, and they both made their way along the promenade to the security office. When Quark saw the crowds in his bar, his eyes widened in alarm. He started toward the entrance, but Odo grabbed him by the ear.
"After you've cooperated, Quark."
Quark continued without protest, because in just those few seconds he had had to look in through the main entrance to his bar, he had seen 3 people whom he did not want to notice him. 2 of the people were those Andorian sisters, together at a small table and leaning so close together in intent conversation that their blue antennae almost touched. But the third person, sitting at the bar, was far more important to avoid than either of the Andorians. She was Vash, a human female who had traveled the galaxy not only with Jean-Luc Picard of the Enterprise, but with the unfathomable entity known only as Q. She was also Quark's favorite archaeologist, the one potential business partner he constantly thought of with real regret as the one who got away. And if Vash had returned to Deep Space Nine ahead of schedule, then Quark had no doubt that the news of Dal Notran's untimely end had already spread across the quadrant, and all of Quark's other special customers were already on their way. Unfortunately, for that exact same reason, Dal Notran's death, Quark had been left with nothing to sell. Which meant that over the next few days, the Andorian sisters were not the only ones on Deep Space Nine who'd be looking to kill a certain Ferengi barkeep. When Sisko had returned to the operations center, he asked Kira into his office. "Major, those 2 dead Cardassians represent a mystery, and I will not have mysteries on my station. Until we find out how those Cardassians died, and why Quark and perhaps 2 other people on this station had their memories interfered with, I can't be certain if any of it might happen again. And believe me, if an attack wing of Jem'Hadar fighters is bearing down at us, I want to know that my officers are not suddenly going to develop a case of amnesia and end up fused into the hull plates. Is that clear?" "Sir, do you honestly believe that the constable has the wrong man and that the real killer is still free on the station?" "That's exactly what I think, Major." As Sisko stood in the doorway to his office, watching the Major head for the turbo lift, he was pleased to unexpectedly see his son Jake just emerging from the lift on the main deck below. His sudden smile was undercut as he saw who stepped out of the lift behind Jake, Jake's best friend Nog and Chief O'Brien. Jake looked up to wave at him as the 3 took the stairs to the upper level. Sisko frowned, and the three visitors froze where they stood. You know, if this were 6 years ago and I saw you three coming up here like this, I'd think Chief O'Brien had caught you boys playing in the Jeffries tubes again. But you two young men are too old for that now, aren't you? O'Brien was wheezing slightly from climbing the stairs.
Funny you should say that, sir.
Sisko sighed. Should we step inside? He suspected he wasn't going to like what they had to tell him. He was right. Jake, Sisko, and Nog had finally done what they should have done years ago and told DS9's chief engineer about the hidden section of the station. Then, with an agitated O'Brien at their side, they had told Jake's father. And then, the strongly disapproving Lieutenant Commander Worf. For the second time in 2 days, Jake and Nog crawled through the Jeffries tube and dropped into the dark section of the corridor. A few seconds later, 3 sparkling columns of quantum mist resolved into Jake's father, O'Brien, and Worf. Sisko leveled his gaze at Jake. All right then, where's this hidden holosuite? Nog hurried ahead.
Right down here, Captain.
The team followed Nog until they were gathered together by the closed door. O'Brien made an adjustment on his tricorder.
I'm not even picking up any evidence of holo equipment, either projectors or micro-force field emitters.
Sisko looked at his son.
You're certain it was a holosuite? Dad, it could run our fishing hole program perfectly. Water and everything.
Sisko nodded at Worf, and Worf tapped the door control. The light from the palm torches stabbed into the room and revealed only a room. Jake turned to his father.
I've never seen that before.
Worf reached the middle of the room, then turned slowly.
It appears to be a lab of some sort.
O'Brien stepped in next.
Circuit testbed, communications console, a few storage lockers.
Jake was perplexed.
But Dad, this was a holosuite. We played in my fishing hole, and Nog had a really great Ferenginar adventure playground.
Nog suddenly added,
Oh, there was the moon, the Bajoran moon.
Sisko asked sharply, which moon? Jake stared beseechingly at Nog, who shrugged.
I don't know. One of the inhabited ones.
Sisko rubbed his free hand over his clean-shaven scalp. It was a gesture Jake had seen his father make 1,000 times, most often when Dax was forcing him into checkmate in 3-dimensional chess. O'Brien walked over to an unidentified console. It was definitely Cardassian in design. Even to Jake's untrained eye, it seemed obvious that whatever had been connected to the console on the shelf had been ripped out. 2 power leads dangled to either side. O'Brien pointed his tricorder at the console's inset shelf.
It was radiating, something I haven't seen before. Couldn't hurt to have Dax take a look. I think it's reasonable to assume that this was a top-secret Cardassian research facility. But why was the work being carried out here? In an occupied sector subject to attack by Bajoran resistance fighters?
Sisko shook his head. I don't know, Chief. But one thing's for sure. Even after 6 years, this old place still has a few surprises left in it. The only thing worse than a Ferengi with a headache was a Ferengi with an earache. And at this moment, in his darkened bar in the middle of DS9's night, Quark suffered from both. Unquestionably, the aftermath of the past 8 hours he had spent with Odo. He gazed up at the vivid orange, red, and yellow stained glass mural of the Tholian admiral that dominated the first floor of his bar.
Why do I even bother? What about you, Admiral? Do you have an answer?
The mural kept its silence, which was no great surprise. For years, that same wall had been dominated by a large Cardassian galler, courtesy of Gul Dukat. Gul Dukat had swaggered in one day to announce he had just won a spectacular work of rare and valuable art in a late-night game of Tango. And since Quark's was the only public facility on the station with a ceiling high enough to properly display this great treasure, Dukat proclaimed Quark's would be its new home. It was always in Quark's mind that if the day ever came that the Cardassians left Terok Nor, he would celebrate that glorious occasion by shattering Gul Dukat's mural into 10,000 shards. But that day had come and gone 6 long years ago. Quark poured himself a snoggin of Romulan ale. To you, Admiral, because you're still here and I'm still here, like some twisted reminder of the 117th rule. You can't free a fish from water. Actually, brother, that's the 217th rule. A lot of people make that mistake. Quark looked up to the second floor. Rom, what are you doing up there? Rom started down the stairs. Cleaning up, brother. Quark set up a second glass. Come on, have a drink to celebrate my release. Rom watched carefully as Quark poured more ale. But wasn't it supposed to be a good idea that you were in protective custody? Quark handed the glass to his brother. It was, until Odo decided I really was guilty and made it a real arrest. But Captain Sisko listened to reason. He made Odo release me and give me a bodyguard. What bodyguard, brother? Quark pointed out to the promenade. But the Bajoran security officer he had left standing watch at the main door to the bar was gone. Quark crouched down and waved his hand at Rom. Go to security. Get Odo. I don't care if you have to pour him out of his pail. Brother, I don't think he lives in a pail anymore. Quark sank deeper behind the bar, knowing there was nowhere to run. He heard Rom asking softly near the door if someone was there. Just maybe whoever was at the door, who had come to kill him, would think Rom was Quark, kill Rom, then leave. My poor brother, how brave he is to risk his life for me. He began to plan Rom's memorial party. Ah! Quark grimaced as he heard his brother's death cry. Then he heard footsteps. Vash, Quark thought, outraged. That human female had killed Rom out of spite. Then Quark heard a second set of footsteps. It was the Andorian sisters. In his mind, he painstakingly choreographed the moves he would have to make to go on the offensive. Then, in a brilliant burst of speed and grace, Quark thrust himself to his feet, spun around like a dancer, swung the bottle of Romulan ale against the edge of the bar, and... Rom? Sorry, brother, but there was nothing I could do. He made me open the door. Despite Rom's babbling, there was no one else present. Who made you open the door? Rom looked down at something on his side of the bar. He did. He said you wanted to see him. Quark leaned forward, looked over the edge of the bar, and multicolored stars exploded in his vision. No matter how bad things look, they can always get worse. Sometimes, Sisko felt that he had never left the wormhole after his first meeting with the aliens. That after his first encounter with the prophets in their celestial temple, everything that had happened since, or that appeared to have happened, was somehow already a memory he was merely reliving. Standing before the sink in the tiny kitchen alcove of his quarters on Deep Space Nine, Sisko whisked at the eggs in their copper bowl, smearing out the streaks of dark pepper sauce, frothing the egg mixture into a whirlpool just as the wormhole frothed the quantum foam of normal space-time. How many times had he done this? Made an omelet? How many times had he made this omelet? Or could it be they were all part of the exact same moment in time, and... As the door to his quarters slid open, Sisko saw Jadzia. Sorry, Benjamin, but Quark's gone. Sisko's sense of disbelief changed quickly to dismay, betrayal. He's left the station? I can't be sure, but, well, maybe you should come down to the bar and see for yourself. I think the situation's more complicated than we first thought. This is going to be a Starfleet matter. Sisko had been afraid of that. Somehow, when Quark was involved, situations always became more complicated. Quark's bar looked normal for this early in the morning. The Dabu table was silent, and faithful Morn was on his stool. Jadzia gestured to the bar. "Let me buy you a Raktajino." "When did you find out Quark was gone?" "Odo told me he finished questioning Quark early this morning, so I went to Quark's quarters at 9, and he wasn't there. Isn't anywhere." A sudden, worrisome thought struck Sisko. "He didn't run into trouble with the Andorian sisters, did he?" Jadzia shook her head. "Odo has them under 26-hour surveillance." "Barkeep, we want to order." Sisko blinked with surprise as a Ferengi jumped up into view from behind the bar. A very small Ferengi.
What do you want?
Jadzia introduced them. "Benjamin, meet Base. Base, meet Captain Benjamin Sisko, commander of Deep Space Nine."
Yeah, right, whatever. You want to order?
2 Raktaginos, please." Base gargled in disgust, then whirled around and dropped below the level of the bar again. Sisko looked questioningly at Jadzia. "Rom says he's an old friend of the family, helping look after the family's interests during Quark's troubles." "Does Rom know where Quark is?" Jadzia rolled her eyes. "Here's where it gets interesting. Rom claims that he didn't know Quark had been released." "Ah, so Quark could have come here, and the only witness would have been Rom, but why do you think it might be a Starfleet matter?" "Base isn't your ordinary Ferengi, Benjamin. He's a smuggler." Sisko drummed his fingers on the bar top. "Presumably working for Quark. Is there any connection between Base and the Andorians?" "Odo's working on it, though I think he has other things on his mind." She nodded for Sisko to look down the length of the bar. Sisko did and saw Vash, the calculating archaeologist, known for her questionable ethics as much as for her beauty. Sisko followed Jadzia down to the end of the bar. Vash turned around on her bar stool. "Captain Sisko, what a pleasure!" "Vash, what can we do for you?" Vash slipped off her bar stool and companionably took Sisko's arm in hers. "Why don't we take a walk?" So Jadzia and Vash walked out of the bar with Sisko, one on each side. Once they were out onto the promenade, Sisko looked at Jadzia, and both of them stopped walking at the same moment. "How can we help you, Vash? I'm serious. We are in the middle of a war zone here, and I have no time for games. Either convince me that you are on DS9 for a legitimate reason, or you're on the next shuttle leaving for Bajor." "Captain, what an attitude!" "You want to understand my attitude, Vash? Very well. Last week, 3 Andorians came to this station. Andorians with troubled legal histories involving smuggling. Then Base shows up in Quark's bar, and now you. The last time we had so many smugglers on board at one time was, coincidentally enough, the last time you were here, when Quark was going to hold an auction of your stolen Gamma Quadrant artifacts." Sisko turned to Jadzia. "I think I see what's going on here. Quark was going to hold another auction, which means that either he came into possession of something he thought would be of interest to the likes of Vash, the Andorians, and Base, or that you have come into possession of something you want Quark to sell." Vash's studied silence told Sisko he was close. "This is your last chance. What's going on here?" Finally, Vash turned and looked directly into Sisko's eyes. She had a question of her own. "Captain, do you believe what they say about Quark? That he killed Nortron?" Sisko met her sharp gaze directly. "No." "Then do exactly as I say. I'm going to walk away from you. I'm going to look angry. You're going to grab me and say that you don't believe me. Make it look good, understand?" Vash threw up her hands. "I've already told you everything I know. Now leave me alone." She spun around and started to walk away. Sisko took 2 quick steps and then took her arm. "Sisko, to security. I need a team on the promenade, now." Vash tugged back and forth between Sisko and Jadzia. Suddenly, she slapped a hand to the side of her neck and staggered, losing her balance. Startled, Sisko caught her as she began to fall. On the side of her slender neck, he saw a small bronze metal dart, no larger than a fingertip. Vash whispered urgently, "Quark, the auction." Sisko bent nearer as Vash's eyes rolled up and her eyelids fluttered. She gasped. An orb. Jalbador. Jadzia smiled as she watched Julian Bashir hold the neural dart up to a light and examine it closely by eye. It was so typical of him, and also what made him so endearing. Here he was in DS9's infirmary, a state-of-the-art Cardassian medical facility that had been fully upgraded with the latest Starfleet innovations, surrounded by scanners and sensors that could shuffle through the dart's composition molecule by molecule, and more often than not identify the planet of origin for every mineral compound used in its manufacture. Yet Julian still had to look at the dart himself, using his own hands and his own eyes to be certain no detail had been missed. A linear induction dart, Jadzia. Centuries-old technology. Its manufacture, interesting enough, is Andorian, as is the neural toxin inside, by cupordionide. Jadzia frowned, perplexed. That's fatal to Andorians, but it's not fatal in humans. Major Kira burst into the infirmary like an avenging paw-wraith.
Where is she?
Bashir immediately stepped in front of Kira. Not until she's awake, Major.
Julian, she is involved in trying to sell an orb of the prophets. That is an outrage. To me, my world, to 10,000 years of Bajorans who have sought to follow the prophet's teachings. I demand to speak to her.
Bashir still didn't move. Major, you have to remember that Vash has just received a jolt of disruptive neural toxin, almost directly to her brain. Maybe what she said did make sense. Maybe it didn't. The point is, we won't know for certain until she wakes up.
Why would someone try to kill Vash with an Andorian toxin?
Odo suddenly entered the infirmary and answered the question.
To make it appear as if an Andorian is the attempted murderer. But whoever the shooter was, he positioned himself precisely where there is a gap in the scanner coverage.
Bashir turned to the constable. Odo, in case whoever attacked Vash tries to come back and finish the job, could you...
I already have 3 officers stationed outside the infirmary, Doctor, and Worf has placed transporter suppression shields around this section of the promenade. In the interests of full security, I would appreciate being in the room with Vash when she wakes up.
Kira added,
So would I. What she's done, or even planned to do, is so serious, I've reported it to Kai Wynn. 3 Vedic Inquisitors are already on their way.
Bashir raised his eyebrows. Doesn't anyone think we should wait for Captain Sisko? Odo stiffened.
He's involved with Chief O'Brien. He'll be expecting a report from me and from you, Doctor, when we're finished with the prisoner. That is, the patient.
Bashir shrugged. All right, then just let me check on her first. When Bashir returned from the surgery, he announced, She's awake. You can come in now, if you still want to, that is. Kira pushed straight past Jadzia into the surgery. A moment later, Odo gave Jadzia a small shrug and followed after Kira. In the surgery, Vash was sitting up in the angled examination bed. She had shadowed circles under her large, expressive eyes, and her lustrous skin was pale, but Jadzia could see no signs of trembling or weakness. You're safe for now, Vash. Vash wasn't impressed. Oh, I see. Being safe must be some new Starfleet term for being a prisoner. Jadzia smiled sweetly. You're not under arrest. Yet. Vash's answering smile was just as sweet. Why would I be under arrest? Is it against some Bajoran law to be the target of an assassin? On Bajor, even the attempt to traffic in orbs is one of the most serious crimes in their system. Vash stretched and moved her shoulders as if verifying the health of her body. I told the captain that, huh? About Quark being involved in selling the orbs? Jadzia nodded. The archaeologist bent forward, rubbed gingerly at the side of her head. On the promenade, when I got hit, I thought I was dying, you know. I remember wanting to tell someone something that might make it easier to find who killed me. My bad luck. I didn't die. Why is that, Doc? Bashir looked away from the Cardassian readouts. The dart contained an Andorian toxin. Vash suddenly laid back against the angled table. The Andorian sisters, Seder and Lean, they've been after me for a long time. Jadzia saw Odo shake his head no at the possibility, but Jadzia did not contradict Vash's supposition. Odo's working on tracking the sisters' movements, but in the meantime, Quark and the Orbs. Let's talk about that. Vash sat up and ruffled her hair into place. What's the point? If I do, I go to prison. If I don't, it's just something I said when I had a shot of bicupor bubbling in my brain. I think what I meant to say to Captain Sisko is, damn, I'm sorry, I'm dying before I ever got a chance to have Quark show me an orb like he promised he would the last time I was on the station. There's one in the temple on the promenade, isn't there? Yeah, I'm sure that's the one Quark said he'd show me. Did you actually think I deal in a stolen orb when I know what they mean to the Bajoran people? Jadzia tried to sound helpful. What orb was Quark going to show you at the temple? Vash swung her legs off the side of the examination table. The orb of Jalbador. Kira moved quickly to Vash's side. Jalbador? The lost red orbs of Jalbador? Yeah, that's what he said he'd show me, a red orb of Jalbador. Kira turned away from Vash, as if she had lost all interest in the archaeologist. This is more than ridiculous. I have to contact the Kai at once. The red orbs of Jalbador don't exist. They're not part of any of the legitimate teachings of our religion. I mean, at least once or twice a year, there's some unbelievable story about the lost orbs being found hidden in the ice on Mount Bahalev, or deep in the Thracian Sea in the sunken ruins of Bahala. Bashir objected. But, Major, Bahala didn't sink in the Thracian Sea. Captain Sisko found it under the Ayr Aubert shield. Exactly, Doctor. But until the emissary found it, Bahala had been lost for 20,000 years. That's 20,000 years of legends and lies and outright fraud. Do you know how many people on Bajor have been bilked by swindlers who claim to have an ancient map that shows the resting places of the red orbs? Bashir suddenly blurted out, "The Brooklyn Bridge." It made so little sense to Jadzia and everyone else in the surgery that they all turned to look at him. On old Earth, to buy the Brooklyn Bridge became a colloquialism for gullibility. Odo interrupted.
Excuse me, Doctor, but is this the same Brooklyn Bridge that's installed at the big amusement park on Earth's moon?
Why, yes. Taking it apart, moving it in sections, rebuilding it, it was one of the most phenomenal engineering feats of the 23rd century.
In other words, eventually, someone really did buy the Brooklyn Bridge.
Jadzia tried not to laugh as Julian's face fell. Well, yes, Odo, but the point is... Never mind. Kira turned to Odo as she was leaving. Forget everything I sent you on Orb law. As far as I'm concerned, you can charge this woman with being a public nuisance. Odo turned back to Vash.
Tell me, what are your plans now?
Staying alive is always high on my list of things to do.
Then obviously staying safely behind transporter-proof shields and being guarded by my officers is agreeable to you.
But that depends on what the price is.
Quark, where is he?
Frankly, Constable, I don't know. He put the word out that he had been asked to be the broker for a transaction involving the red orbs of Jalbador. And he asked me if I knew of any prospective buyers.
And did you?
Are you kidding? Half the antiquarian collectors in the Alpha Quadrant would bankrupt themselves for a chance to own a Bajoran orb. Odo continued.
And you plan to buy it for yourself, then hold your own auction for the people who could really pay.
Vash held up her hands as if surrendering. Guilty.
You know, of course, what the penalties are for trading in orbs. Not just in Bajoran law, but under the Federation's own Protection of Antiquities statutes.
Vash curled a finger at Odo, asking him to move closer. Odo, remember what the Major said. There are no red orbs of Jalbador. If someone wants to buy something he only thinks is illegal, that's not a crime. Odo rocked back and crossed his arms.
Oh, You are a piece of work. I'll keep all the security precautions in place while you're in the infirmary. But as soon as Dr. Bashir says you can be released, I want you off this station. Is that understood?
For once, Vash seemed truly serious. Yeah, I understand. And thank you. After the surgery door had slid shut and Odo had gone, Jadzia and Julian were in the main work area, without Vash. Julian, I'm surprised at you. You and Odo were falling for everything Vash said. Bashir rolled the dart in his fingers. Jadzia, everything Vash was saying in there was a lie. I knew what was going on the instant she made her mistake. What mistake? She said she had bicupor bubbling in her brain, except all I said was she had been exposed to an Andorian neural toxin. Jadzia tapped her forehead with her fingers. But Julian, how could she take the chance that her accomplice would be able to shoot her at the right time, with the right toxin, without being seen? Bashir suddenly slapped his hand to the side of his neck, driving the neural dart needle into his flesh. Julian! Bashir's only response was to seem to pluck the dart from his neck and then roll it forward in his fingers so that Jadzia could see the needle had been removed. It was in his other hand. Jadzia then concluded, she's been lying from the beginning, which could mean she does know where Quark is, and the red orbs could very well be real. Which means now we go see Benjamin.